What's going on, everybody? coverkillernation here. Welcome back to 5 recently released albums that you should check out. And this episode, like many as of late, is a little bit different than our norm. And that's mainly because the releases of this past weekend were a bit different also. A lot of EPs dropped this past weekend, so we are going to speak about 4 of them today, as well as 2 full-length albums. Now, you might think that EPs are kind of missable. You know, you're able to do that and you're not missing too much. But in this case, with a couple of these, you would be very, very wrong. Sometimes they house some pretty cool stuff and showcase things that a band is perhaps preparing to undertake. So we're going to get right out of the gate with one of those EPs, and that's Watchtower with Concepts of Math Book 1. Now, the last time these guys have released something that's not a single, that's the key word right here, was 1989. That was whenever their last full length came out. So this is their first brand new release in more than 25 years of distinction of this variety. So, wow. Do you remember Watchtower? Their 2 albums from the 80s are considered very significant, considering they blended progressive metal along with some thrash in order to really create and craft this very chaotic, but yet very, at times, beautiful, very technically proficient style of music. Progressive thrash, we also would hear it a little bit in the 1990s, the early portion with jazz, the jazz fusion that you got with bands such as Atheist and Cynic. However, with Watchtower on this 5-track EP right here, it's a nice reintroduction into what Watchtower is all about, with some recording, upgrades here in this calendar year. The 2016 Sound Wars making the overall scope of this disc sound a little bit nicer. Now, after a 3-minute, nearly 4-minute introduction, you get right into Arguments Against Design, which showcases some of those vocals that really embrace the chaos a little further. These are clean vocals, but have a little bit more of that thrashy rasp to them, which gives them a little bit more power, and it definitely separates this band away from some of the progressive contemporaries. It definitely aligns them a little bit more with the thrash side, bringing 2 worlds together. And this is a disc that is also 100% transformed by its near 10-minute finale off of this 5-track EP entitled Mathematica Calculus, which just bends and weaves and goes into all sorts of different directions in an attempt to really bring back the full Watchtower effort, and does so very nicely. Now, of course, this is said to be Book 1, which means that we can perhaps assume a Book 2 is coming in EP form, or perhaps we're going to get a full length from these guys finally after nearly 30 years. Definitely hope so. Check these guys out. It's like listening to a snapshot of history, and it's pretty cool. Disillusion with Alea is the second EP on our list, and these guys haven't released a full length in nearly a decade. This has been a long time coming for this group as well. They play a style of progressive metal that has a little bit of some other significance, perhaps some gothic tones or some even doom tones at times, but this is one that is a 1-track EP, 10 minutes, 20 seconds, and reminds me a little bit more of some of the work they were able to accomplish on their very acclaimed 2004 album, Back to Times of Splendor. That was a disc that is extremely influential, definitely a gem that if you have not heard, you certainly need to make the effort to find it and listen to it. It is one album that definitely needs to be consumable, that is 10 years old or more, that I feel that a lot of people have missed. Now, Alea definitely has some of that similar property to it. It's one that does start off with a little bit of softness and then registers and dials itself up into its main body and main idea. The vocals are very approachable, and the scope of this is pretty nice. Now, it's comparable to what they did on that album, but I wouldn't necessarily consider it better or 100% on par with it. I hope that this means that Disillusion is scoping out some studio space. That way they can get a full length underway and may perhaps use some of that past work as a bit of inspiration. Although it may be interesting to see what 10 years of dormancy has really done to this band. So definitely turn back the clock a little bit with Disillusion as well, this progressive metal gem from Germany, and check out the Alea EP. Let's step away from EPs for a while and go into a full length that was released this past week, and one of the 2 we're going to talk about. That album is the Eternalist by the band Agatus. This is a Greek metal band. This is their first album in 10 years. They had originally in their first run a black metal / epic metal real combination going for them. It was almost like black metal meets Iron Maiden, but now they've stripped away a lot of those black metal references and embraced a little bit of progressive, and now it almost feels like Rotting Christ meets Iron Maiden. And based off of that, it's certainly a sort of nice switch up, considering it has led to some pretty damn good songwriting, which the band possessed during their first run, but something about this feels very complete and also a bit unique. It definitely gives it a bit of an edge. And I think that songwriting is something that is understated at times by a lot of people, but this is an album where the songwriting is certainly one of its major positives. It's something that they do extremely well on this album. And you can definitely tell some of the little nuances, such as the screams that you hear on the Oath of Magic and Fire. Either that or some of the Rotting Christ influences that are strongly heard on songs such as Dreamer, Pearls of the Sea Part 2, either that or At Dusk I Was Born off of the second half of this disc. There's a lot of great material to come by, and this is an album that almost rings as a modern tome of those 1980s early occult metal bands, and it's a really nice touch. It's something that gives this a little bit of an extra oomph, a little bit of extra ass behind its step, and yeah, this is my surprise of the week. Love that fanfare. So definitely check this one out. Don't let it go under your radar. Let's go ahead and talk about the second full length that was released this past weekend that you should check out, and that's Candiria's While They Were Sleeping. Now, these guys were kind of darlings in the latter portion of the 90s, first part of the 2000s. They had a very schizophrenic sound that includes a little bit of jazz, a little bit of what would be considered maybe early metalcore, a little bit of new metal here and there. It was just something that was kind of chaotic, and it was interesting to a lot of music fans, considering you didn't know where it was going to go next. Consider it sort of a precursor to what Between the Buried and Me has been able to do with their controlled chaos and their frenzy. Now with this album here, it's one that has a lot of great capability, and it's also one that feels like controlled chaos, similar to what you would hear on a Meshuggah record. Everything feels very, very calculated, and everything that is going from one portion to the next makes a lot of linear sense, even if, whenever you listen to this, it doesn't sound like it's linear. In fact, it sounds like you're going through a very convoluted math formula. And a great example of this is Wandering Light. This is a track that's right in the middle of it, decides to go onto a jazz lounge freelance. What? It was definitely something that came out of left field, but it works so well with the song, and if you don't believe it after the first listen, listen to it again and you'll start to understand just exactly how that was able to be fit in so nicely. Now, this is an album that can sometimes overstay its welcome, but its fury, its passion, its energy, this is all something that it still maintains wrapped up very tightly, and that's what makes this a pretty smooth listen even amid those bumps in the road. It definitely still sort of rights the ship a little bit every single time it seems to go off on a tangent that almost seems like it's impossible to go back on. And I think the presence of some smaller tracks, such as The Cause, either that or Opaque, definitely help out with that, considering they allow that energy to sort of ball up into something that gets, it's right in your face and gets you sort of motivated, and then you go into the next couple of tracks of insanity. This is a pretty good album. This is certainly one I would recommend. If you're an old school fan of this group, definitely say hail in the comments below. Check this one out. Back to EPs, shall we? We have Hereafter by Hanging Garden. This is a melodic doom / death metal band that has had a couple of albums released pretty close to the release of this. So we're out of that theme, but that's okay. These guys are pretty cool. They have a really nice sound to them, and they're willing to sort of go outside of their wheelhouse with an EP like this to really embrace more of the doom side, as opposed to everything feeling like it was gruff and rough and rugged. And this has some guest vocalists to really help it out. One track has the singer from Senetex, and two of them, in fact the bookends of this EP, Penumbra and Toward the Sun, both feature Miko from Swallow the Sun. So you get some beautiful clean vocals off of this EP from somebody who was a part of one of the best albums of last year in Songs from the North 1, 2, and 3. This is a pretty awesome EP that hopefully is leading us to another Hanging Garden album. These guys are sort of an underrated and underappreciated gem, and the movement on their songs and sort of the range that they're able to build between tracks is what makes them so impressive. They may be a band that has doom right there in that title, but there's a reason that melodic idea exists within it, considering this is one that builds melody, builds character, and builds a lot of atmosphere in order to accompany each song, not each track feeling like it's the same mood, the same atmosphere, the same feeling. That's what makes them unique. This is an EP to scope out. If this is your first foray in the Hanging Garden, I think that you'll become a fan. We end with Leaves, Eyes, and Fires in the North. And we end with this one as opposed to leading with it because this is the most traditional EP that you're going to find. One that has essentially one new song where the rest of everything else is either acoustic versions, remixes, or in this case, updated 2016 versions of past work or past covers, whatever it may be. So really you're only getting one true new track off of this, Fires in the North, which really continues the Leaves Eyes philosophy. There's not much really to talk about here. It's a fairly decent track. Hopefully this is a preamble to what we are going to get off of the new Leaves Eyes disc. The vocals, of course, majestic, and the building blocks of this band are always one of their secondary strengths that cause the real sonoscape that you get with each track to feel like it's larger than life as opposed to just another song. Now, what you also get from this is an acoustic version of Fires in the North, which is a little bit more intimate, which is pretty cool. They still do have some of the grunts that were present in the original version, which gives it a nice little touch of something special. And then you get Edge of Steel, Sacred Vow, and Swords in Rock, which are 2016 versions of these tracks. Swords in Rock having a really cool little shing right before we get started, which just makes me think that I haven't played nearly enough sword-based video games lately. Either way, this is, I think, the only one out of the EPs that's kind of, optional, considering there's a good chance that Fires in the North will end up being on the next LE record, so you're not going to miss much with this. But you will miss out on the cool updated versions of the last three songs, which are pretty neat to hear, reimagined just a little bit. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, 4 EPs and 2 full-length albums that you need to check out before we traverse into the next weekend, which is going to involve groups such as Darkthrone. So there is a lot that's going to be talked about, which has been the story of my life for the past month and a half. It's been crazy, man. So I hope that you guys check these out. Whenever you do, come back to this video or just keep the videos saved on your screen or whatever. Let me know what you think about it. Is there anything that was missed last week? What are you excited about for next week? My name is coverkillernation. Put all that stuff in the comments below. I'm losing my mind piece by piece. I'll talk to you later. Take care.